I'm Maria Luce Lupetti, and I'm presenting you a work developed in collaboration with Luciano, Cavalcante, Siebert, and David Abbink. Our work is about confronting narratives of driving automation through contestational artifacts. When we talk about narratives, we refer to all those forms of storytelling such as scientific reports, magazines, movies, newspapers, talk shows, advertisement, and much more, that all together contribute building collective imaginaries. In the case of driving automation, a collective imaginary of future mobility that revolves around the idea of autonomous vehicles as solutions to numerous traffic and societal issues. In this imaginary, autonomous vehicles will help us saving lives, reducing costs, improving traffic efficiency, and providing unprecedented mobility opportunities for diversely abled people. The problem with these dominant narratives is that they are grounded on the underlying assumption that the driver is the problem. In the case of safety, for instance, a recurring argument is that since 90% of road accidents are caused by human error, by relieving the human from the driving task, autonomous vehicles should reduce road deaths and injuries by a similar percentage. Luckily, counter-narratives do exist. Experts, especially, warn us about how all the claimed benefits of autonomous vehicles will be valid only when all vehicles will be able to drive completely autonomously. Such scenario, deemed unrealistic by some, at the very least requires intermediate steps to happen, steps in which the human driver will only be partially relieved from the driving task. This will bring novel problems, such as loss of situational awareness. Arguments of feasibility and unprecedented risks then delineate a counter-narrative of inherent risks that come with automated driving. So, public understanding of automated driving is generally divided into two dominant and polarized views. One optimistic, that sees autonomous vehicles as a solution, and one pessimistic, that sees autonomous vehicles as inherently risky and costly technologies. Both dominant narratives, however, tend to limit their discourse around the narrow idea of driving automation as autonomous vehicles. This has direct impact on the public acceptability of this technology, but also and foremost on the way strategic stakeholders understand and take decisions about their implementations and regulations. Our research engages with this issue and investigates how might we enable strategic stakeholders to confront dominant narratives when discussing and taking decisions regarding automated driving technologies. We build on design research approaches such as adversarial design, discursive design, design for debate, and contestational design that engage with public views and attitudes towards technologies by making use of artifacts that give vivid and graspable forms to imaginative and compelling, even if troubling, future possibilities. So we designed and employed contestational artifacts, what Isalvo defines as design objects that manifest aspects of a political condition and offer alternatives to dominant practices and agendas. Leveraging established tactics from critical and speculative design, we crafted artifacts that combine a familiar object with unconventional details to generate cognitive estrangement and sustain ambiguity. We produced 4 alternative artifacts, each representing an alternative type of driving automation and a related ideological position, described also in short text. These artifacts consist of 3D printed details mounted on the steering wheel of a driving simulator. The first embodiment has spikes and stands for a scenario where no automation is used. The second has handcuffs and stands for a scenario where the vehicle is partially automated and control is traded between the car and the human driver. The third embodiment reminds of crutches handles and stands for a partially automated scenario where control is shared between the car and the human driver. And in the last, there is no added detail. We removed the steering wheel and left the surface. These stand for the scenario where driving is fully automated. We also developed the artifacts in 2 other alternative sets. One as 3D printed small-scale versions of the embodiments, and one as only visual representations. We employed these artifacts in 4 focus groups we run with relevant stakeholders, such as engineers, designers, innovation directors, municipality employees, traffic experts, and road safety experts. Although employing a different version of the artifacts every time, each workshop lasted 2 hours and followed the same procedure. Initially, participants were invited to disclose personal opinions about driving automation. After that, they were introduced to the artifacts and invited to associate them with descriptions. And last, participants were asked to agree on one automation scenario to be implemented in a short period of time and to reflect on what would be the implication of such a transition. Our assumptions were that the themes discussed by the stakeholders during the disclosing phase would match, or to a large extent, map to dominant narratives, that the focus group activities would promote nuanced discussions and divergence in argumentations, and that the artifacts would play a crucial role in enriching the discussions and in allowing confrontation with popular argumentations. As we expected, participants' discussions initially mapped onto dominant narratives. Although participants of each focus group emphasized different arguments, these were all topics well known in popular narratives, such as safety, feasibility, or trust. Regarding our second assumption, we did notice that, from the disclosing to the deciding phases, discussions increasingly showed signs of more nuanced argumentations. In particular, participants not only started addressing topics that, although present in scientific literature, are usually absent in popular narratives, but also expressing views that will map to multiple contrasting themes. We describe these instances as narrative tensions, argumentations that are inherently controversial and, as such, promote divergent and complexity thinking. We encountered 3 main narrative tensions across the 4 focus groups. The first concerns arguments of efficiency and sustainability. The tension that we summarized as driverless connected mobility services that are not public transport emerged as an incongruency between participants' belief that driving automation technologies would promote shared mobility, but at the same time describing automated vehicles always as personal cars. The second tension, inclusive vehicles of exclusion, surfaced the controversial implications of inclusivity argumentations. In fact, the idea that fully automated vehicles would provide mobility opportunities for some, such as disabled people, was sufficient for many participants to justify the need for such vehicles. However, participants also raised questions of how this technological transition would impact other social groups, such as the elderly and the not wealthy. The third tension that we summarized as global stories of somewhere technologies focuses on the clash we notice between dominant narratives and participants' argumentations regarding the feasibility of a possible scenario where all vehicles would be autonomous. In particular, participants referred to their countries of origin or other physical and geographical features to imagine where autonomous vehicles could or could not work. Regarding our last assumption, we could notice how artifacts helped expanding the discussion from the sole idea of fully autonomous vehicles to also considering the shared and traded control driving alternatives. Although they mostly discussed these alternatives as intermediate phases, these also surfaced a conceptualization of the human-vehicle relationship that differed from the idea of the human as the problem that underlies the dominant narratives. The human driver and the vehicle are rather conceptualized as bargaining partners in drive, 2 agents tackling together a dangerous task. However, despite stakeholders did confront taken for granted arguments, this was only partially due to the contestational artifacts. Nevertheless, differently from other parts of the activities, the discussions surrounding the artifacts promoted designerly thinking and let participants indulge into imagining how the artifacts could transform into actual product features. This was particularly true in the case of the steering wheel with spikes. Almost all participants interpreted the spikes as a dynamic feature, something that could come out when needed. This led participants to wonder whether and how should a vehicle communicate the intention to take over the driving task. Based on these results, we suggest that when confronting and contesting dominant narratives through design, the structure of the activity should be considered as a contestational artifact in itself. In our investigation, when we asked participants to match the artifacts with the descriptions, we created a space for questioning by provoking a clash between the participant, rational thinking, and the rhetorical nature of the artifacts. However, physical artifacts can promote distinctively designerly thinking, so the choice of an artifact, whether it is a process, a physical object, or something else, should be carefully pondered according to the scope and the scale of an intervention. And when choosing physical artifacts, one should be aware that interactive features may not be necessary or even helpful. In our experience, the most effective artifacts were the one tangible but non-experiential. The artifacts mounted on the driving simulator reduced the ambiguity of the embodiments that was necessary to provoke discussion. Ambiguity, in fact, is a powerful and crucial design strategy to trigger imagination and formulation of hypotheses. To conclude, we believe that this work and the methodological approach we propose represents one of the possible entry points, a non-prescriptive instrument for pointing at the inherent tensions that need to be addressed if we truly aim for just mobility futures.